Wow, hey, pura vida, mi gente. How you guys doing? Thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you guys making the time to be here, especially if you're here live. Shout out to everybody in the live chat. I see you guys. Thank you for all your support. Appreciate you guys being here. Um, so today we're gonna just continue a series that I actually really enjoy researching, exposing, showing people, and it's my underwater ghost town series that I said I was gonna do, and I really haven't gone into it. There's so many underwater ghost towns, really, guys. There's so many man-made lakes in North America and throughout the Americas. I just want to document that and show you guys that. So I've already done like, yeah, 4 videos, I guess, specifically on underwater towns. And these are really good videos, really good information. If you missed the previous parts of this series, Underwater Ghost Towns and Sites of America, that's what the playlist is called. You can find this same playlist right here in this same order. Right, and today we're going to be talking about a couple of man-made lakes in South Carolina and the old town of Ferguson and some so-called plantations that have been flooded that are now lying under Lake Marion and Lake Moultrie in Orangeburg County, South Carolina. All right, so that's where we're going to get into today real quick. Appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm trying to do at least 2 or 3 of these videos this week on different regions, right? Because there's so many in every state. We've gone through like most of the ones in Georgia and Tennessee, right? Check out that again. Check out the series. We did one on Lake Martin, Kayaking, Alabama, right? This is your so-called black founder. Yeah, so we're just gonna continue today again. Just a lot of random websites or historical websites or whatever. Like this, the ColumbiaStar.com mentions what has happened here. Like this one says Pineville Historic Refuge, Ferguson, the origins, right? Written by Warner M. Montgomery, PhD. There's 2 Yankee carbangers. So we're gonna I actually have a book. I'd rather read you the book, but I just want to show you. I purchased the book on Amazon Kindle, so we're gonna just read a little of the history and how it affected the population and all this other stuff, right? And what was the majority of the population. Same website, like part 2, the final years. So I do want to kind of show these images. So let me see. There you go. Some of the images here. All right. That is the kiln at Ferguson. And it was used to dry the lumber before it was shipped. So basically, they had built this town. You guys are going to read and learn. If you don't know, it was like a lumberjack town, and the whole town was made just for the workers. Literally, it was such a big industry. They had so many workers. They created a town, right? So that's another picture right there. All right, this is United States GhostTowns.com. So they got Ferguson in here, right? South Carolina ghost town beneath Lake Marion's waters in South Carolina, where there's once bustling lumber town. There we go. I said lumberjack. I said lumber town, thrived from 1881 to the 1940s, right? Founded by Francis Beetler and B.F. Ferguson. All right. They literally it was all about business and profits for them. They didn't care about the environment, who they had to relocate or whatever, And they left an everlasting impact on the environment there. It's not the same. These were like wetlands, wild wetlands and like swampy areas. There was a lot of habitat there, and there's a lot of history there before that with the indigenous people. They try to play out, they try to say, oh, there's no archaeological stuff, but that was conducted by the same people funding the project. So, so I just want to show you again, going little by little before I get to the book. Let also people come in case people are just coming in. So University of South Carolina did a little thing on it. Memoirs of a Drowned Town. When 89-year-old Richard Mintz was just a boy in the 1930s, he remembers playing a game he called Executive in the abandoned offices of the Santee River Cypress Lumber Company. They were cutting down a lot of cypress trees. There's a lot of lumber, guys. These guys made so much money. There was so much profit. They got the land really cheap because they were swamplands. It says in Ferguson, near his hometown of Utahville, South Carolina. Okay, so that's the story given by him. It says here in the crimeandcast.com, city of Ferguson, the submerged ghost town beneath Lake Marion. So there's like a couple of ruins still visible above water, and like in 2007, the water levels went so low that it kind of not rediscovered, but it exposed the town again. It brought back the memories to people because a lot of generations had already forgotten about it, right? So the forgotten submerged ghost town beneath Lake Marion. Beneath the still waters of Lake Marion lies a haunting relic of South Carolina's industrial past, the ghost town of Ferguson, once a thriving lumber town along the Santee River. Ferguson now exists only in fragments, a kiln jutting from the water, scattered brick remains, and stories passed down through generations. It's a quiet reminder of a town's sacrifice for progress. Sacrifice for progress. A piece of history that resurfaces only when droughts lower the lake's waters. So just like, the other episodes we've done, like, you guys are going to see there's actual whole towns under there, and they didn't move every grave. They didn't get everything out of there, Again, Ferguson, South Carolina. This is, again, just mainstream, just over the top info. We're going to read a book. Ferguson is a ghost town, a former lumber mill settlement in Orangeburg County, South Carolina. It was a company town owned by Northern lumbermen, Francis Beetler and Benjamin F. Ferguson, both of Chicago. The co-CEOs founded the Santee River Cypress Lumber Company in 1881 for the purpose of harvesting old-growth timber from Blackwater River wetlands in central South Carolina. The firm, which controlled 165,000 acres, 67,000 hectares of land, concentrated its efforts on bald cypress timber. Right? That's what they were there to get, right? These kind of, see? The cedars of the Most High, the cedars of God, yeah. And the Americas, right? Okay. So, Orangeburg County, right? That's where it's located. Just want to, right? History. By the time the European arrival, Eastern Siouan-speaking tribes, such as the Chara or Sara people, right? The Catawba and the Pedi, inhabited the Piedmont area above the fall line. So Eastern Woodlands were the main people in this area for thousands of years. Of course, there has been people over there since Paleo-Indian times. They, those time periods they give. We're talking about very ancient. We're talking about archaic times. We're talking about woodland period, and then it comes into a more modern periods where you got the Eastern Siouan people there, right? So I just want to, you understand, it's even called the Santee. The Santee is also Eastern Siouan people related to them. So the Santee River, all this area was known for Eastern Siouan tribes. I just want to put that clear because I did find an archaeological whatever they did in the 60s, and this was really after they had built. They couldn't really do real archaeological work. They can't get under the water. Like, they're not really, they said, hey, we didn't find anything. But we know there was settlements there, possibly, and they might find something in the future. That's what they left it at, right? Anyways, just want to show you guys, right? So Lake Marion, right? Moultrie, right next to it. So Lake Marion top and Lake Moultrie. These are the man-made lakes that they created, right? Again, just like the other ones. And you guys are going to see as I go through this series, how many more, like, there's so many. I'm starting to be like, which ones were really actually lakes, which ones are the actual original lakes? Because it seems like they're all man-made. All right. So just want to show you Lake Moultrie as well. Lake Marion is a large man-made lake in central South Carolina. Large, like I think actually the largest lake in South Carolina. Lake Marion, right? And then you got Lake Moultrie that's right next to it. Is a large man-made lake in South Carolina. Man-made. South Carolina with the crescent moon, huh? Huguenots. Yeah, welcome, welcome. All right, so let's close that. Again, I'm just going through some quick stuff before I get to a book, right? Let me just show this. Randomconnections.com, ghost towns of Lake Marion. You see some ruins. People actually do a little kayaking and they go look at the ruins. So sometime last year, I came across an article about the town of Ferguson, South Carolina. The defunct town is now submerged under Lake Marion. All that remains are some foundations and the old lumber kiln that had been part of the Santee Cypress Lumber Company. While looking for information about the old town, I also came across the location of the old Church of the Epiphany on Church Island. The rock cemetery, which had been associated with the church, is still located on the island. Since these two were fairly close, it seemed that this would be an excellent paddling trip, right? So, like I said, they'd be doing little tours on their kayaking, you know, right? So again, just looking at some images real quick. All right. He had his little breakfast, his little tour. They went kayaking, you see? It's like a little video. I think it's probably this guy's video, most likely, that I don't know if I still got it, but. So just want to show you again, this is just what you can see above water. Most of it is underwater, right? Most of it is underwater. Yeah, just like Lake Lanier in Georgia. That's what I've talked about, again, in my Georgia videos of underwater ghost towns of Norfolk, Georgia, right? If you guys, it's really, and it's actually deep. Those are good videos you guys got to check out. All right, you guys see the images? Look, there's like trees sticking out of the water still, and has left a lot of trees there and stuff. So cool little adventure they had. Right, so that's part one, and there's like part two, you know, more pictures. It's the same thing though, right? This is the kind of stuff you find online. This is from the Santee Cooper Electric Company, whatever, the ones who build this. This is their own interpretation, you know, all they did, all the good stuff, you know, environment, the boundary. But this is all they flooded. This looks like that was an ancient river that they just, yeah. So, and then you got South Carolina Encyclopedia talking about it. That the 22-mile canal opened in 1800, and for the next 50 years allowed planters to ship cotton, rice, and timber to Charleston. By the mid-19th century, railroads virtually eliminated the need for inland waterways. So let me get, this is like yeah, this is part of the construction of the dam and all that. Okay, and this is kayaking the Ferguson town ruins, Lake Marion, South Carolina. Shout out to Ranger BB. Thanks, man. I give it a like, man. Ranger BB, shout out, YouTube, fair use. All right, he's just showing, you know, his little trip. You see that? You guys see the trees literally coming out the water? Look at that. That's crazy right there. Yeah. All right. You see that? Wow, that looks like an ocean right there. That part looks like an ocean. Wow, where's the other side? That's crazy. That is the biggest lake in South Carolina, and it's man-made, literally man-made. Can you believe all the history that's under there that they covered up? You know, crazy. All right, so you guys saw what it looks like. Hey, T-Bone, that's what's up. Where did you send the images? Like, where do I check? My email or something? That'll be cool to see. All right. While I get while I get the book ready, it might be the same. It might be the images I got in this book. So, all right, let me so I'm gonna be reading from this book right here, Sunken Plantations, the Santee Cooper Project by Douglas W. Bostick. Again, I bought this on Amazon. Douglas, okay, Douglas. So, fair use. I'm just reading something I purchased. I supported you. If you like the guy, if you guys like the book, get it. TikTok. I don't even get into TikTok, T-Bone. I don't even get into TikTok. I have many other ways to contact me. All right. It's all good. It says, okay, so this is the book, guys, we're gonna get into. All right. So let's start right here, right in part one. It says here the story. By the mid-18th century, South Carolinians decided a waterway route from the mid-state to Charleston ports. Rivers and creeks served as the highway of early America, providing quicker and easier routes than cutting through the frontier. This desire to effectively connect the state led to the Santee Canal project in 1793. In the early 20th century, renewed interest in a waterway route and the need for hydroelectric power fueled the drive that led to the Santee Cooper project. This book records those two efforts and the price we pay for progress, the price we pay. So again, they said, hey, the South Carolinas wanted the way. So were they speaking for all South Carolinians? How about the Indians? You think they wanted their habitat to be destroyed like that? Where their wildlife was and their ancient homeland and all that? Because they changed the environment so much when they did this. Just like in the other videos we saw before, the underwater ones. They're like, oh yeah, we're coming with progress and all that. And they did so much damage, right? To the people, to the land, right? It says the old Santee Canal. And how do we know they say, oh, we built this canal. How do we know that wasn't already there? How do they, how do we know they ain't lying that was already there? How they build it with their oxen carts, supposedly, right? With their, in 1790s? Well, how y'all do all that in 1790s? Hold on, guys, my fault. Anyways, as early as 1770s, like I look, 1770s, a committee of the Commons House of Assembly discussed the need to connect the Santee and Cooper rivers. Such a project would, for the first time, allow products and raw goods from the mid-state to efficiently reach the port of Charleston. Likewise, foodstuffs and finished goods could easily ship from Charleston to these newer settlements. The Assembly hired an engineer, Henry Mousson, to survey the possible routes for such a connection. By 1775, Mousson reported on 5 routes to connect the rivers. Unfortunately, the advent of the Revolutionary War diverted everyone's attention from the project. In January 1782, with the British still occupying Charleston, the South Carolina General Assembly met in Jacksonboro on the Edisto River. The Assembly approved a commission to cause the land between the Santee and Cooper rivers to be surveyed and examined and to fix on the most convenient place for cutting a canal so as to open a navigation route from one to the other of these rivers. The Assembly was pleased with this first bold step, but lacked the necessary funds to follow through. In November 1785, a group of Charleston citizens petitioned the State Assembly for a charter to pursue the canal plan. In early 1786, the South Carolina General Assembly chartered a company for the inland navigation between the Santee and Cooper rivers. General William Moultrie was appointed president. John Rutledge, former governor and president of the Republic of South Carolina, was vice president, and Generals Francis Marion and Thomas Sumter were selected as directors. Moultrie wrote to George Washington, seeking advice as to the selection of an engineer for this venture. Washington responded that he thought the most talented engineers were French. You guys hear that? Huh. Despite the advice, the commission hired a Swedish engineer, Colonel John Christian Santee, who had served with Sumter in the war. Santee insisted on finding his own route to build the canal rather than selecting one of the options identified by Moultrie. Santee's choice of route ignored the natural water routes through the region, an important problem with his plan. You see, he went with the hijack, the other guy. He's like, nah. Let's not go the natural way or flow of the water. Let's make our own. Work did not begin until 1793 due to a critical labor shortage. Planters were busy shifting their crops from indigo to cotton and were not anxious to make their slaves available for the project. Slaves. So who's these slaves, huh? White laborers shielded away from volunteering to work in the swamps in the summer due to the heat and the dangers of fevers. Eventually, the project hired as many as 1,000 laborers to build the canal, using picks, shovels, and wheelbarrows. You mean Indians? Who you got to work that? Finally, the Santee Canal was complete in 1800 at a cost of $750,000. The canal was 35 feet wide at the surface, 20 feet wide at the bottom, and 5.5 feet deep. Workers also constructed a 10-foot wide towpath to allow draft animals to pull boats. In May 1801, William Buford traveled the 90-mile trip above Columbia on the Broad River to arrive in Charleston using the new Santee Canal. Everyone asserted this canal would create great wealth for the state. Unfortunately, Sam's choice of routes had a fatal flaw, and seasonal droughts would sometimes dry up sections of the canal. The canal also began to compete with the railway, which was now extending to the mid and upstate. The canal company charged every boat a flat fee, regardless of whether it was empty or loaded. The freight companies creatively responded by building boats that could be stacked on the return trips. This loss of fees deeply affected the canal company. Eventually, the railway, both faster and more dependable, outcompeted the Santee Canal. By the 1840s, so they literally wasted their time doing that and hurt and changed the environment, messed up the environment. What a waste, right? By the 1840s, the canal was slipping into disuse. In 1850, the General Assembly revoked the charter for the canal company. All right, and here's an image, and they're going to give us a description on the next page. All right, it says, this photograph shows some of the remnants of the old Santee Canal, which stretched from White Oak Landing on the Santee River to Biggin Creek on the Cooper River. And then this is another image, right? The canal had 3 sections. The first ascended 34 feet and 2.5 miles. Okay, so we got the measurements already. And it says here, the Santee Cooper project. In 1913, the Columbia Railway and Navigation Company was running steamship service from Columbia to Georgetown. They filed a request to amend its charter to construct a more suitable navigation route between the Santee and Cooper rivers. Though approved, the company lacked funding to immediately pursue the plan. By 1917, the Charleston Chamber of Commerce was clamoring for a canal, both for navigation and electricity generation. In 1923, Charleston Major John Grace wrote Colleton County State Senator J.P. Paget of his desire for a hydroelectric project using the Santee and Cooper rivers. Grace asserted that the project would transform Charleston, providing a much-needed boost to an economically depressed region. Gabriel A. Guinard and T.C. Williams, Columbia businessmen and partners in the Columbia Railway and Navigation Company, seized the opportunity and newfound interest. They selected one of the original routes mapped by Moultrie from Ferguson on the Santee to Monk's Corner on the Cooper. They applied for approval with the Federal Power Commission for both the canal and power generation plant. at Monk's Corner. In 1926, they were granted a 50-year license for the project. South Carolina was already in the midst of an economic depression. The rice industry had given way to stronger competition in Texas and Louisiana. Boll weevils devastated cotton, and the market further collapsed after World War I. The stock market crash of 1929 simply added to the trouble of a state already good at being poor. One South Carolina newspaper reported, "In almost every form of human progress, South Carolina has sunk about as far as the state can sink." In 1930, South Carolina had the highest illiteracy rate in the nation. Malaria was still a raging problem, and the state was unable to pay its bills, instead using state scrip to pay state employees. At the 1932 Democratic Party convention, Franklin D. Roosevelt, a candidate for the nomination of president, was speaking of the advantages of federal programs for public works. Convention delegates South Carolina Governor Ibra Blackwood and Charleston Mayor Bernard Maybank attended these meetings and proposed that the federal government take over the Santee Cooper project. In 1933, State Senator Richard Jeffries sponsored a bill, with 25 of the 46 senators co-sponsoring, to create a public corporation. The bill passed the Senate but was defeated in the House. The bill opposition was generated by three groups of detractors. Some felt that power production was not the purview of the state and should be left to private enterprise. Others felt strongly that South Carolina could not afford to fund such an ambitious project. Finally, influential St. John's Parish residents and wealthy northern industrialists, wanting to protect their hunting preserves, lobbied against the bill. Harry Ashmore, a Greenville journalist, wrote, "South Carolina is seeking to rehabilitate that region, St. John's, to bring wealth not to a few as in other days, but prosperity to many. A vision of an industrial empire in a virgin land has taken hold of this state. There is a dream of repopulating a vast area." You guys hear what they were saying, this guy? He was saying, no, if they would have left the land alone, a lot of people could have benefited. And they were, planning a repopulating of a vast area. New committee was formed, including a young legislator from Edgefield, J. Strom Thurmond. New legislation was proposed, citing 4 goals for the project. 1, to provide affordable electric power for South Carolina. 2, to develop the Santee, Cooper, and Congaree rivers for navigation. 3, to reclaim and drain swamp lands. And 4, to reforest the watersheds of the state's rivers. In February, a committee of 64 South Carolina officials and citizens traveled to Washington to meet with the Public Works Administration and the Works Progress Administration. On April 7, 1934, Governor Blackwood signed the bill to create the South Carolina Public Service Authority, popularly known as the Santee Cooper, right? Blackwood appointed Bernard Maybank as the first chairman. President Roosevelt wrote in July 1935, "From my study of the Santee Cooper project, I am convinced that its construction, which can be speedily put underway, will not only serve to overcome the distress caused by unemployment in that section, but will also permanently contribute to the economic development of the Southeast." Dodge the hijack. Not to be deterred, opponents filed a lawsuit to block the act. On September 10, 1935, the South Carolina Supreme Court ruled that the Santee Cooper Act was constitutional. Still determined to forestall the project, Carolina Power and Light Company, South Carolina Power Company, and Broad River Power Company filed a federal lawsuit. So this is their competition, and they only cared because they didn't want competition. They argued that the project costs would far exceed the estimates, that the lakes were geologically unsuitable, all right, and that the project would do an irreparable injury to the majority of the people of South Carolina. So what people exactly? That specifically who? Black folks. In 1937, federal judge J. Lyles Glenn ruled in favor of the Santee Cooper project. The decision was appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which upheld the decision on May 3, 1938. Initially, a $14 million federal grant was awarded, and additional loan guarantees totaled $17 million, a total figure that was 2.5 times the size of the entire 1939 South Carolina state budget. The United States Department of the Interior sent a consultant, Thomas T. Waterman, to assess the value of the historic homes that were threatened by the project. Considering all the plantation homes, he recommended that only Hanover and the Rocks were worthy of preservation, a view that would be disputed today given the large number of historic homes lost to the project. You guys hear that? The project took 2 years, 6 months and 26 days from the first clearing to the flooding of the lakes. The navigation lock at the Pinopolis Dam was the highest single lift lock in the world, lifting boats 75 feet from the tail-raised canal to Lake Moultrie. The project created 2 lakes, Lake Moultrie near Pinopolis and Lake Marion within the bluffs of the Santee River marshes north of Utah Springs. Lake Marion is the larger of the 2, but it is not completely cleared of thousands of stumps, dead tree trunks, and live cypress trees. Lake Moultrie is smaller but more open, measuring 14 miles at the widest point. The project did open 86,000 acres to duck and goose hunting and 160,000 acres to fishing. So today now it's all great for fishing, right? Oh, it's perfect, it's beautiful, man, I love fishing, but because today Santee Cooper provides power to 1.7 million South Carolinians and to 32 large industries, municipal utilities in Bamberg and Georgetown and the Charleston Air Base. Oh, good for you. So I know a lot of you probably like, oh, that's good, Kurimeo. 1.7 million people get energy. Well, that's if you still want to go with their hijacked technology and the way they give us energy, when we can have free energy and have the same amount of energy or even more energy in natural ways. But we stopped doing that. They made us stop so they can charge us this stuff here. We're going to control the electricity. Now, any energy or anything you do on your own, it won't count. It comes from us. It comes from us. What about the old technology, the free energy that's in the atmosphere and everything else, the way we used to get our energy? What energy do we really need? Think about it. How did our ancestors live? Talk about the ancestors, but you wouldn't live like them. Says game hunting was always both a sport and necessary for good gatherings in St. John's Parish. The plantation properties were teeming with wild turkeys and quail and deer. This is before, right? This is before they're talking about, before they flooded the area. There used to be so much wild turkeys and quail and deer. This is what I'm telling you about the wildlife, the environmental damage they did. And now, the thing about this history too, I want to just real quick talk about this. We're going to see a lot of images. They're going to show poor black folks, and they want us to think all these people were just slaves, the descendants of slaves, and worse, African slaves, right? And that the plantations and all these people were white, right? They will show light-skinned, dressed up people here, and they will show black folks that look like poor people or that could have been slaves, even though this is not even slavery times, right? This is not even slavery times, guys. This happened again, we're in 1930s, 1940s. So, they ain't gonna show us. How do we know that all the plantation houses that were here were owned by so-called white or pale-skinned people, right? And how do you know that they were all just, these evil plantations and not just a farm and owned by black folks? Now, the majority of the town, they're going to admit, was black folks. The majority of this whole place right here was black folks. They're going to say, oh, descendants of slaves. That's what I tell you, to be ready to dodge the hijack, okay? Don't just, oh, yeah, and if you still think white means slave owner, black means the slave, how do you know a lot of the pale-skinned people weren't slaves or indentured servants or, like I've shown before, right? Part of the poor class too in this town, right? So keep that in mind. Now it says there were thousands of so-called African Americans. That's why I said be ready to touch the hijack. Mostly descendants of plantation slaves. I told you literally they were gonna say that. I literally told you they were about to say that. That's why I told you that that's the hijack. All right, give me the specifics. Give me all their names and all the records. Just show me all the records. They don't got that here. So we know how to dodge the hijack and not generalize. Living in the Santee Cooper basin, poverty was rampant through the region. So suppose it's from the courtesy of the Library of Congress. Okay. Says many African American families were still living in old plantation slave cabins, structures that were well over 100 years old. What if these were Indians and you forced them to build houses and relocate them to a lot when they lived throughout the land and they had their own towns that you took over? Or you're just telling us a different story, right? Anyway, poverty, I can see, I know, look, okay, so right in this picture, there's a light-skinned girl right here, you see? Many African American, yeah, okay, here's your narratives. Okay, your narratives. You just told us the whole country was in a depression. You literally just told us the whole country was about to go into the Great Depression and all that. Okay. When asked about the Santee Cooper project to buy her property and move the family, one elderly black woman indicated her excitement, saying, "Great God, then I have coffee and macaroni pie 3 times a day." What? Oh man, they mocking. See, this is really what I'm saying. Like, all black folks didn't speak like that. You know what I mean? Like, all right. These poor families held tightly to their new treasures, like a piece of furniture or a lace cloth. In this photograph, the family had insulated their cabin with newspaper in an attempt to trap any heat possible. By spring, this would strip away to escape the coming heat of low country summers. Uh, Looks like a regular house from those times to me. Even white folks live like this. So that's what I'm saying. Like, this is not a big, this is the country kind of right here, you know? Anyway, in the project, the Santee Cooper Resettlement Division relocated 901 families, most all black, 901 families times, let's say they got 10 kids, there's 10 of them in each household, right? 10, or let's just say 8. So 901 times 8, how much is that? Like the large plantation homes, most of these old cabins were destroyed. Okay. I know there was people that looked just like him in the large so-called plantation homes too. Stop trying to act like they were only in the little small cabins, man. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. There were few jobs available to so-called black families in St. John's by the early 20th century. Yeah, you had just franchised black folks nationally. Most workers either farmed or timbered trees for turpentine, and which is something the Indians used to do. They learned that from the Indians, huh? Or are they the Indians? What happened to all the Eastern Siouan people here? On the small African American farms in St. John's, everyone pitched in and worked. Charleston photographer George W. Johnston captured this photograph of children mailing rice on the Cooper. So that was the previous picture, right? Because the text is like behind, right? So then this house right here is the description. Numerous churches, so that's a church, black and white, were destroyed by the Cooper Santee project. Black Oak Church, pictured here, was first established in 1808. The church was dismantled in 1941, and its graves were moved to St. Stephen's Episcopal Church in Pashy Plantation. And then it shows Black Oak Church was home to Cain, Dubois, Jurvey, Lucas, Porcher, Ravenel family. Sounds like a lot of Huguenots. Cain, huh? Sound like a lot of Huguenots family to me. South Carolina, remember. And you know, they mix with Indians too, right? So, but Dubois, huh? Dubois, Dubois, huh? Okay. Among others, here the families gather for covered dish lunch at the Black Oaks ground. This is why I tell you that's the hijack, because they want to show like the prominent people as the white and the poor people as the black. Like, these are descendants of slaves. Of course they lived there too. The Santee Cooper project relocated 93 cemeteries throughout St. John's Parish, a massive project in itself. One resident offered that the upcoming flooding for the lakes menaced the homes of the living and the graves of the dead. Yeah, you see, like desecrating graves, moving people's graves around, that's already like, that's really foul right there, you know? The graves of General Francis Marion and his family at Belle Isle Plantation, home of his brother Gabriel, survived the flood. Several partial grave markers were moved from Black Oak to join them. More than 6,000 graves were relocated in the resettlement efforts. Without ground-penetrating radar, which was not yet available, the relocation crews had to rely solely on markers of any type to locate the graves. So if they didn't have any markers, guys, that means they didn't move them, right? Many colonial-era graves whose cypress tomb boards had long since disappeared would never be discovered. All right, and you start doing tests on these bones, you're gonna find, I bet you're gonna find a lot of black folks. Okay, this is what I'm telling you guys. This is what they're doing to create to make profits of their fake energy technology that we shouldn't even be using. We should be going off a different energy, right? Natural. The skeletal remains were removed and placed in new caskets for reinterment. In many cases where tangible remains were no longer available, the grave markers were moved and concrete slabs were poured over the original gravesite. Okay. And then this picture right here of this structure says at the height of construction, more than 12,500 people were employed by the Santee Cooper project. 22 work camps were constructed. 11 of these were permanent, and 11 camps moved as the work progressed. The men were housed in barracks and fed in large mess halls. Separate barracks and mess halls were established for white and black workers. Some barracks were built for fewer men and more comfort. The quarters pictured here for the engineers and was much smaller and more comfortable than the large barracks built for laborers. You see the brother right here cutting the trees down. Says the land was first cleared of trees using axes and cross-cut saws, no small task for the thick virgin woodlands present in much of St. John's Parish. A total of 104 million feet of virgin, listen to this, virgin hardwood were harvested. 104 million feet of hardwood, guys, were harvested in the Santee River Basin. A total of 200 million feet of timber were cut and sold during the project. They made a lot of money. How did they help the local people that was working there the whole time? Your so-called descendants of slaves, how did you help them this whole time? Or were there a lot of them benefiting from it too? Right? And owners of these plantation homes too, that you actually try to bury that history. You want to say, oh, it was just white folks. That's a lot of wood. That's a lot of profits. Temporarily elevated rail lines had to be constructed to move the harvested timber out of the swamps and river basin. As with the barracks for the laborers, these tracks were moved and reassembled to the locations needed. That's a big undertaking, right? There's a lot of forests they're cutting down. That's a lot of wood. That's a lot of trees. That's a lot of natural habitat they're destroying. 9,000 of the men in the workforce were assigned to logging, milling, and clearing. Particularly given the area in which this was done, the Santee Cooper project was a model of ingenuity and efficiency. The project required obtaining title of 1,326 tracts of land. By April 1939, land clearing crews were hard at work. By June of that year, Santee Cooper had acquired 1,100 of the needed properties, totaling more than 177,000 acres. Sorry, not 177,000 acres. An average of $12.19 per acre was paid for farmland. They were getting from that cheap. Once the trees were removed and shipped out for sale, many areas still had to be excavated. Through steam shovels were used, the progress was slow. Sorry, those steam shovels were used, the progress was slow. Once completed, the Santee Cooper project was one of the largest land clearing projects in the history of the United States. Land clearing. I wonder all the archaeological stuff they cleared, and oh, we didn't find nothing. Yeah, we didn't find anything. Nothing to see here. They had made up their mind. Even if they had found something, they wasn't gonna stop, guys. This is why I'm trying to tell you. So this image right here is during excavation, many archaeological sites were uncovered. Like I just said, wow. Literally, I just read a report from 1967 saying that they didn't find anything. Literally saying they didn't find anything, but that they might find in the future. And now it's saying during excavation, many archaeological sites were uncovered. You see what I'm saying? Including unknown burial sites and many Native American sites. That's what they're hiding. This photograph was taken at one site where a set of whale bones was uncovered. Wow. Many archaeological sites. But they wrote a report. The same company funded the archaeologists, right? To write a report saying they didn't find anything. And I believed it. I didn't believe it actually, but I'm just saying I believe that maybe, okay, they didn't find sign. That doesn't mean there's nothing there, right? Like, I just thinking they didn't really look. They could say whatever, like, but this book is telling you they did find many burial sites, many Native American sites. This photograph was taken, okay? Then you got this one right here. They're doing a joke, right? Hey, Dawood, how about including Charleston in our vacation and taking a look at that new power project? He said, oh, Ma, you mean the Santee Cooper project? My dear, that's something every American ought to see, man. All right. In December 1941, the Charleston News and Courier published a special Power and Defense issue featuring best wishes to Santee Cooper from some of the popular cosmic strip characters, right? And then they have this one, a Popeye. Hey, pals, I'm wishing the new project lots and lots of power. What's my Spanish? The Santee Cooper project was not without its detractors. While the land purchase and clearing project were fully supported by the state, and if needed, the courts through eminent domain, the boards of directors was committed to winning in the court of public opinion as well, you see. They were committed to this. Nothing was gonna stop them. Look at this nice house. That's black folks right there. You see? When families had to be relocated, their houses were moved if possible. Many of the so-called African American cabins and shacks were not worth saving. Huh. Oh, really? In that case, a new home was built for the family. See, they're relocating people, they're destroying the habitat. It's mainly black folks. Did they ever vote and say, yeah, we want this, yeah, we allowing this to happen, we want this? Did they get a chance to speak and fight this? Who are their descendants? You're talking about the native archaeological sites. Are you sure that's not some of their descendants? You're relocating them? Santee Cooper moved families and neighbors to new sites together to maintain these important rural relationships. 100 chickens were also provided for every family that had to be relocated. They gave them all 100 chickens. That sounds like a good deal, right? They said that'll keep them quiet. Give them 100 chickens, man. That'll keep them quiet and happy. When new communities were created, schoolhouses were also constructed to provide for the families. Most of the African American families that were relocated viewed the benefits provided as a windfall. So, I read a whole website, that ones I was showing you earlier, and they were talking about how the people, even though they got 100 chickens and all that, they went through a lot of stuff, and a lot of them didn't want to be relocated. They went through a lot of shit, and they couldn't really, that didn't mean they were going to be on their feet and have a normal life again, just because you're giving them 100 chickens and all this stuff, right? On November 12, 1941, the reservoir began to fill. By February 17, 1942, the Pinopolis hydroelectric plant produced its first electricity. Okay. This is after it's done, right? No more Ferguson. The Santee Cooper project created Lake Marion, 110,600 acres, and Lake Moultrie, 60,400 acres, joined by a 7-mile diversion canal. The lakes vary in depth and shallow swamp to 30 feet. The two lakes offer world-class freshwater fishing. Now it's all good because now people can fish, right? They hold the world record for channel catfish. You know, that's doesn't have scales. I ain't gonna judge, but that's one of the dirty animals. Okay, 58 pounds. They did not hold the world record for striped bass, 55 pounds, through 1977. The lakes also hold state records for largemouth bass. That's a good fish. Black crappie chain, jack in Arkansas, blue cat. Oh, catfish again, huh? So there, if you like catfish, hey man. So we're gonna read a little bit of part 2. Not all of it. We're gonna skim through it. It's gonna talk about some of the so-called plantations. They want you to believe all these were owned by white folks and all this other stuff, right? And they want us also to believe that they documented all the houses, right? So the region of the Low Country that became St. John's Parish was located approximately 50 miles from Charleston, from the Cooper River northwesterly to the Santee River. The family settled in. Listen to this. This is why I can't make this stuff up, guys. The family settled in these lowlands included some English descent, some like the Sinklers of Scottish descent, but most of settlers were French Huguenots. Body bag for the illusion. French Huguenots, huh? French Huguenots, huh? I know I gotta do this. I gotta do this because, you know, I gotta do this. Hold up. Hold up. Huguenot. Just bear with, guys. Just bear with me since we're live. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do this. Man. Appreciate your patience. So, French Huguenot. What is a so-called Huguenot? Go to the basics. One-on-one Huguenot basics, right? All right. History of the Conquest of Spain by the Arab Moors. All right, so this is a book from the 1800s. There's a longer title. I've shown it in my previous Huguenot videos, the whole title. Just go back. We got a part of the book when you go to page 445 where it's talking about what Columbus was saying and how his vessel was fitted out in that little port of Palos, which had lately been a Moorish port. His sailors were, many of them, men with Moorish blood in their veins. Talking about Columbus and all these ships, right? They were Moors? It has been asserted that when the Moors were driven out, the Moors were driven out by who? Driven out by the Inquisition, by the Catholics. That doesn't mean white folks. Don't think it's white versus black. It was black folks. Remember, Charles V, the guy driving these people out, Charles V was a black man. Charles V was a black man. The Habsburg family, right, were so-called black. The Habsburgs were so-called black. So again, let's not be one-sided. Oh yeah, that's their slave they put there, right? Holding the Habsburg. Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, sure they were. So anyways, when the Moors were driven out of Spain and Portugal, right? That's where they were, right? You guys know the history of the Moors, right? Or are we gonna pretend we don't know the history of the Moors now? Okay. Who's the Moors? Okay. Moors, right? Want to use the word Moors to signify all so-called black folks. You want to generalize, right? But we know they're talking about melanated people, right? So it has been asserted that when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who afterwards, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots. They became what? Huguenots. Who? Moors. Moors. And that of these many emigrated where? At a later date to where? South Carolina. South Carolina. South Carolina. Moors who became Huguenots who ended up in South Carolina, huh? Okay. Well, that makes sense because it's confirming this history right here. We are in South Carolina, and it's literally letting us know that the first settlers in this area were French Huguenots, guys. The Huguenots were there since the 1500s, not just the 16 or 1700s. So we're talking about a very long time. So yeah, eventually ethnic cleansing could have happened. People could have amalgamated and become lighter. But who are the Huguenots? Moors and Sephardic Jews, cryptos. Okay, I wasn't making that up. I know the last names. That's why I said these sound like Huguenot names. I hadn't read this. I didn't know it was gonna literally tell me that it was Huguenot family, so you can see. All right. So somewhere in there, there's black Europeans too. Don't think all these are the houses of only white folks. This is what I've been trying to tell you. In 1598, Henry IV of France, trying to end the French wars of religion, issued the Edict of Nantes. You know, again, check out my Huguenot video so you can see the whole history and breakdown of the Huguenots and what they went through, their whole history, right? In 1685, Louis XIV, the grandson of Henry IV, revoked the edict and declared Protestantism to be illegal. Who's the Protestants? Many of these Protestants, known as French Huguenots, fled to Great Britain, Prussia, or Switzerland to avoid persecution. They amalgamated everywhere. They became like chameleons. They assimilated. Others made the arduous journey to the colonies in America. Many of these Huguenots, like the Porcher, Gaylord, Massique, Palmer, Ravenel, Marion, like Marion is named after, right? And Gordon families settled in St. John's Parish. The country was relatively isolated by its distance from Charleston. Reaching Charleston required a ride on the river barge, or by 1833, taking your carriage 20 miles away to Branchville to catch the train. A map of St. John's Parish in 1865 was inscribed, "Here dwelt a people in peace and contentment, whose ancestors fled from tyranny in other lands," or tyranny, right? The Catholics, they tiled the ground and roamed the forest, and at last was well with their world. And now they found paradise, right? The promised land. Indigo and rice brought prosperity to St. John's, but in most cases, their fortunes were made growing Santee long staple cotton. This hybrid between upland cotton and the famous Sea Island cotton created wealth for St. John's planters, never realized before. Remember that the biggest cotton plantation producer or owner, William Ellison, a black man, South Carolina too. Remember that. So don't just think, oh, we're talking about white folks. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And I got the video on William Ellison. Remember, literally the biggest plantation owner in the South, period. But he was in South Carolina and in the South, the biggest cotton producer. The Santee long cotton would never quite match the quality of Sea Island cotton, but it was highly sought at the markets and abroad. As the Santee Cooper project was debated in the South Carolina legislature, Greenville journalist Harry Ashmore wrote, "Today, thousands of acres of South Carolina low country, once fertile fields and the foundations of fortunes and culture, lie idle and forgotten, save perhaps by a few sportsmen, by waterfowl and swamp game. The march of progress and civilization has left in its wake decaying mansions, speeders now of a more glorious day, silent and vacant in their watch over the lands where once their masters reaped crops of large return of indigo and rice." You guys hear? So even before they started building all these land, this was already abandoned for years, and they literally mention you decaying mansions. How old are these mansions? How old, and who really own these mansions? They want us to always think these are all white folks. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You gotta dodge the hijacks, break out of those ways of thinking. Something had happened. Hey, there was people who live in fortunes. They had what happened? Black folks got this franchise, huh? Ashmore's point was well taken, but in fact, many of the plantations in St. John's by the turn of the 20th century were still cultivated and inhabited by the descendants of the colonial and antebellum owners. Some of them, well, We got to make sure because there's the whole thing of orphan trains and incubator babies. So I like to make sure. Anyways, neither rice nor cotton was cultivated in large numbers because I know who the Huguenots are and what they look like in colonial times when they got here, as they are described in many primary sources. Henry Edmund Ravenel recorded in 1898, to this day, the labor of the section of the country which we have in view remains completely demoralized, nor has any substitute for cotton yet appeared, nor indeed any crop which may be expected to enrich the country. Many planters were trying their luck at truck farming or dairy operations, nor the industrialists, with ready cash, were buying up lands to create hunting preserves and chasing the myth of becoming the southern planters. So it's going to list now certain plantations that they knew. So historically, right, again, they want us to think Kunta Kinte right here and all these, but dodge the hijack, right? So Belvedere Plantation, built in 1786 supposedly, was one of the earliest cotton plantations built in the region. Captain James Sinclair, a resident of St. Stephen's Parish, obtained a grant to his property in 1770. Critical Revolutionary Battle of Utah Springs was fought on part of the Sinclair property in 1782. The beautiful property was bordered on the north and south by two streams. It says Sinclair died in 1800. You see, he died way back. So how do we know what he looked like if camera wasn't invented? That's why I just want to say that, right? And his widow Margaret Canty built a plantation house that moved the family to Belvedere. Their grandson Charles Sinclair and his wife Emily Wharton Sinclair moved to Belvedere. So yeah, by 1930s and 40s, people could have lightened up in some families, right? I just want to, I want to have context with everything we're reading here. So, using Emily's correspondence to her family in Philadelphia and her plantation receipt book, Antebellum Life at Belvedere Plantation, as detailed in a marvelous book, An Antebellum Plantation Household by Annie Sinclair Wally, if you want to read it. Charles cultivated property to good effect, and prior to the war, he had 195 slaves working the property. Indentured servants, okay. So that's one of them, right? This is underwater, right? This is underwater, right? Says the Sinclair descendants emptied and dismantled the plantation house in 1941, distributing the Belvedere treasures among the family. The grand plantation owned by the Sinclair family for 171 years was claimed by the muddy waters of the Santee, right? So let me see if this one of them. This might be one of the Belvedere plantation home was typical house in the Santee group. Okay, so yeah, I guess that's what it looked like. So again, this is underwater now, right? There's an image that looks like a drawing to me. That doesn't look like a real photo image, all right? That's what I'm saying, man. I don't fall for that. Don't try that with me. No, sorry, don't try that. But your Beavis and Butthead looking like George Washington with the same, always the same look. All right, I got you. I got you, dog. Huguenot, huh? Moors, huh? Okay, I got you. Oh wait, this is the Sinclair one. So this is the so again, this is a more modern picture. When cameras were invented, by the time the original Sinclair, he was long gone. Okay. Either way. Okay. So then you got the Bunker Hill Plantation, part of the Hog Swamp Plantation, Upper St. John's Parish. Dr. Edmund Ravenel, Huguenot, inherited a portion of the property from the estate of his father, Daniel Ravenel of Wanted Plantation. Ravenel practiced medicine in Charleston and never lived at Bunker Hill. In 1836, Ravenel sold his plantation to William Dennis, his overseer. His overseer, huh? Why did he have an overseer? Mr. Ravenel, Huguenot, right? Yeah. He lived there for 18 years before selling the property. Look at it. It looks like a cabin to me. You get what I'm saying? This look like with the black, they were showing the black folks living in a cabin, look like a regular cabin to me. All right. The plantation stayed in the Harvey family until Santee Cooper acquired it in 1939. Okay. Then you got the Cedar Springs Plantation, located just north of Ferguson Swamp and 8 miles from Pinopolis in Upper St. John's Parish, formerly known as Buffalo Hole. The plantation derived its name from the large and curious sinks on the property. Sinks, huh? Professor Frederick Porcher, Huguenot, grandson of the first owner, right? So the grandson of the very first owner, right? So that he wrote this in 1868. He's talking about his grandfather. So his grandfather's from the at least 1700s, 100 years before him, Hereabouts are several remarkable sinks in the earth, which were formerly supposed to be buffalo lakes, afterwards extinct fountains. Huh. So listen, these were formerly supposed to be buffalo lakes, afterwards extinct fountains, huh? These bottoms are firm enough to support a man's weight, but although very deep, they never hold water. Philip Porcher and Oilfield Plantation in St. Stephen's Parish acquired this property prior to the Revolutionary War. As he prepared his will late in life, he was upset that he didn't have enough properties in St. Stephen's to leave one to each of his sons. Okay, so that's the Porchers, right? As the property eventually passed to Isaac C. Porcher, reputed to be the last surviving pure-blooded Huguenot. The pure blood, he's a pure blood. Pure blood what? Pure blood Huguenot. Oh shit. Oh, you mean pure blood more? So there. What is a Huguenot? If that's a pure, if a pure blood Huguenot would have to be a Moor, right? I'm just saying. At the time Santee Cooper acquired the Cedar Springs property, the plantation was owned by Percival Porcher. Okay, so you see, who are these people? Show me the images of these people. See, they want to show only the white ones. That's what I'm saying. They only want to show you the light-skinned ones. They don't want to show you that these other folks were black. Already showed two properties they didn't show images of, right? They showed the one Scottish descendant guy, right? And that drawn. So Utah Plantation. James Sinclair, so another Sinclair owned property, right? So this would become Belvedere 2, part of the Belvedere Plantation, right? So the same family that owned this one, right? Then this is, I mean, they want us to think these are, this is the white people's house. Okay. Nice inside, look at that. They got a deer in there. They got the Hanover Plantation, 1688. The Lord's proprietors granted a French Huguenot immigrant. Listen, I can't make this up, guys. We're talking about in 1688, all right? I'm going to go back. I'm sorry. I know a lot of you are going to have a hard time with this. It has been asserted that when the Moors were driven out, not just asserted, but we've proven it, right? It has been asserted that when the Moors were driven out, thousands took refuge in the south of France, who afterwards, abhorring the Roman Catholic persecutions, became Huguenots, and that of these many emigrated at a later date to South Carolina. And here you go. And one of those people, not only emigrated, but he got a grant from the Lord's proprietors in 1688. We're talking about a Moor, right? 1688. Let's have real context here. Granted a French Huguenot immigrant named Saint Julian 3 tracts of land in Carolina. In 1716, a grandson, Paul St. Julian, built a home and named the plantation Hanover in honor and thanks to the House of Hanover, which had come to the British throne. The St. Julian family and other French Huguenots were eternally grateful to the British throne, which had befriended the French refugees after the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. Why? Because at this point, whoever's this British throne, they're Protestant. They're going with the Protestant. They're also Protestant, so they're hooking up their other Protestant cryptos, comrades. Yeah. After the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, Hanover Plantation House with the House of Northampton was the oldest remaining house in St. John's Parish by 7 decades. The blend of French and English construction techniques is unique in the historic homes extended in the United States. The house has many interesting and unique features. The North Foundation, this is what they hid, guys. This is all the history they flooded and buried. Okay? In 1750, Henry Ravenel married this St. Julian. So the Ravenels married into this St. Julian house, right? He got the grant in 1688. Moors, free white, right? Free white includes Moors, remember. Do I have to show that too? All right. So this is it right here. That looks like a regular house cabin to me. You're talking about, oh, they couldn't move the black folks. That's a cabin to me, man. Come on now. In 1939, when surveyed, the Hanover House was surrounded by unkept fields and encroaching woodlands. Why? What had happened to the owners and the people? What had you done? Something had happened, guys. You know, some people don't just abandon towns and their houses and property. It was discovered that everything from the frame to the floor and the shingles was made of native cypress. Wow. Courtesy of Miss Sarah Sproul. That would have lasted centuries, right, if it was taken care of. The home's character reflected the French influence introduced by the St. Julian family, the Moorish influence. The U.S. Department of Interior reported that no other 18th century examples of French provenance are known in this country, leaving the Hanover House of a natural historic importance, right? They said that in the 1700s. Oh, well, they said that, right? And they flooded it, right? They didn't preserve it. The house was constructed of wood and tire. Okay, so we got the whole story, right? They messed up. Look at the firewood place. Look at this. Look at that. All made out of cypress. What's this? The front door feet 2 inches. French style waterman reported this door. So this other image is the barn. Was the only remaining outbuilding left on the plantation by 1939. All right, so look at this other house. This looks like a real nice house. So look, I just want to point out they didn't show us no pictures of the owners, these Ravenels or St. Julian. All right, they don't have no. What's the images, right? Okay, I just want to point that out for the record, Your Honor. Okay, sustained. Yeah, you better know. You better sustain it. It says the Hanover House was saved and reconstructed at Clemson University. Look, so look, guys, look, they reconstructed it. That's not the same house. They totally remodeled it. So that's this house, right? And they relocated it. You know, they moved some of these houses, right? They're like, now we gotta keep this house for sure. Huh, the Huguenots know how to build. We gotta keep this for sure. So they rebuilt it. Look, they moved it and relocated it. No, it says, okay, so remaining outbuilding level, okay, being of no particular historic architecture important, it was destroyed. No, 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 no. Oh, no, the barn was destroyed. Hold on, my fault. It says the Hanover House was saved and reconstructed at Clemson University in upstate South Carolina. Okay. Reconstructed. Huh. How much reconstructed? The house was completely restored and opened in 1962. In 1994, the 18th century home was relocated to the campus Botanical Garden. Wow. Then we got Indian Field Plantation, huh? What an interesting name. Indian Field, huh? Thought to be part of an original St. Julian grant. That was also his, the Moor, from 1688. This stunning property was listed on early plats as Southampton, found just south of General Moultrie's Northampton Plantation. The plantation was known for its massive oaks and the crystal clear stream flowing through the grounds. Legends held that this property was a popular camping ground for Native Americans. Man. Wow, man. See, that's what I'm saying, man. We don't even understand how sacred this land might have been for the Eastern Sioux people that were from there. All the Eastern Sioux people, was your land. And this was a very popular so-called camping ground. They don't just camp recreationally. Indians didn't just do that, right? Like, I mean, when they were hunting or seeking refuge or in a spring or something, a natural spring that would heal them, or you know, doing whatever they're doing, right? Native Americans, huh? See, guys, this is what I'm saying. This is what they flooded. No wonder it's called Indian Field, huh? So who did you have there working? So what happened to these so-called Native Americans that were actually camping there, had this as a popular spot for them? What happened to all of them? They just left, right? When you took over the town, they just left, right? They just disappeared into thin air, right? They just disappeared, right? William Massick, a Charleston merchant. Who's the merchant? Charleston was a free people of color town. Yo, you guys got to remember the past videos and the research we've done. Married his first cousin, Elizabeth. That was normal. They were marrying cousins. That was normal. That's how you keep it in the family. That's what the Huguenots and crypto Jews and Moors did. That's what they did. It was normal. The daughters of Philip Porcher of Oldfield Plantation and Stevens Parish. This association with Porcher led to an interest in agriculture. William began by planting on his father-in-law's plantation. Using the profits from this venture, he purchased a property he named Indian Field. Okay, Indian Field. Yeah, so look at the images again. This little image, look at this one. The Indian Field House. So this is where Indians got down. How do you know that wasn't their house? How the hell do we know they hadn't built that was in their meeting house if that was their camping ground? How do you know that wasn't their meeting house and it's older than they're telling us? How do we know that, guys? This is what I'm trying to tell you. They can say whatever they want to us. Okay, let's say the Moore, St. Julian, he built it in the 1600s. Okay, that is pretty old actually. So this was a popular Indian camping ground, but he got to build his houses there, right? In the 1600s, they just let him, right? The Indians just let him, right? I got to try to make sense out of this, right? So the Indian Field house was owned by A.M. Barnes in Clarencedale, New York, and was used as hunting preserve. So they took their hunting grounds, the Indians' hunting grounds. Listen, the house was long deserted and the inferior finish had been stripped. Wow. Yeah, to me, when I hear things like this, to me, all I can think is this was probably black folks who owned this. Yeah, deserted. Why did you make them desert their house? Okay, this is the Indians. Okay, the Indians had gone. That was their camping ground, but then you're saying it was deserted. We got no pictures of the original. Oh, okay, all right, okay. That's their family. The Huguenots were mixing a lot with American Indians. We've documented that. They made it a thing in Acadia. They made it a thing in Louisiana. Everywhere they went, they made it a thing to marry an Indian woman. That was part of their laws. That's literally what they did. Located 6 miles west of Pinopolis, the plantation was in the area to be flooded by the lake. Once acquired by the Santee Cooper, the Indian field house was destroyed. Yeah, let's destroy all the black folks' homes. Okay, okay. Wow, look at this. 1881, invitation. Then you got Lawson's Pond Plantation. This is owned by Philip Portia, purchased Lawson's Pond in the early 19th century for just that purpose. So who he purchased it from? Says the plantation gets its name from a large pond found on the southwest side of the Congaree River Road, also known as the Old Cherokee Path, so-called Cherokee, huh? That's Eastern Siouan land. Yeah, what you want to call it, Cherokee. Near the point where the road intersects the Nelson's Ferry Road, the Lawson Pond Plantation House was built just in front of the pond in the Indian Trail, right? Right where the Indians walk by. Let's just build it right here. That was a pretty big house. Look at that. That's 3 floors. That was pretty big. Well, it looks like 3 floors. It might be two, but it has a big basement probably. Why does it look like the foundations were already there? You see, like they built on top of a foundation. Look at it. I want you to notice that. What if they're building on top of old buildings that were already there? Look at that. Sitting on top brick pillars. Listen, it's a large 2-story structure sitting on top brick pillars. Why? Why does it flood there? Underneath, massive hand-hewn logs held in place with pegs from the foundation. Interesting. Interesting, huh? They build on top of pillars. Okay. The rear of the house. Portico, look at the inside. This is pretty cool. And this is, again, all this is flooded, huh? Sitting on high ground, the house was saved and has been restored. Okay. In 1977, the Lawson's Pond Plantation House was placed on the. Okay, you didn't show no images of the people, no images of who owns it, right? Then you got the Log Do Plantation, the Kirk family, the Kirk family. All right. That's it right here. The smokehouse survived. Northampton Plantation. The St. John's property, later named Northampton, was first acquired by Peter, the oldest son of Huguenot immigrant Pierre de Saint Julien. Ha, we should do a genealogy, right? De Malacare. De Malacare, crypto, Spain and Portugal. Around 1700, he passed the property to his son Benjamin, Hebrew name, who built the plantation house in 1716. These are black folks right here at this time, right? Benjamin died without issue, and the plantation returned to Peter. He then left the property to his sister Elizabeth, the wife of General William Moultrie. As the Revolutionary War began, Moultrie was appointed to the rank of colonel in the 2nd South Carolina Regiment. In 1776, he was appointed second in command of the Charleston defenses. In January, he was assigned the task of building Fort Sullivan, later renamed Fort Moultrie, with no stone to construct a proper fortification. Moultrie chose to use palmetto logs to build his defenses. Okay. Yeah, that is the history of that. All right. Some whitewash images. Okay. Revolutionary War hero. That's what Lake Moultrie is named after. All right. And this was part of the property as well. The large stable at Northampton was once home to many fine horses raised and bred by the Moultrie and Ravenel families. Wow, the Huguenots, Black Europeans, you know, who mixed with Indians, right? In 1939, the stable was in fine condition, but empty. Empty, huh? Why was all this stuff empty, guys? Ophir Plantation, Ophir. It says 6 miles northwest of Pinopolis was one of the ancestral homes of the Porcher family. Again, Huguenots. Porch is named after Huguenots, the car brand, right? Peter Porcher of Peru Plantation. Listen, first acquired Ophir prior to the Revolutionary War. On his death, Peter left his 3 plantations, Peru, Mexico, and Ophir, to his 3 sons. Why? Why did he name them that? That's interesting, right? That's so interesting that they were called that. Porcher. So he left it to his sons, and they had slaves, and they lived there, and it was a beautiful house, and lived happily ever after. And then they got this franchise, and then the town got flooded, and their history got erased, right? Again, they didn't show pictures of who owns these places, right? This is what I'm telling you, because I'm keep saying that because they're going to show pictures of one of these plantations like they did earlier, and they want us to think that all these people were white, just like the ones they're going to show us, right? You got the Pond Bluff Plantation, first granted to James Flood in 1758, and then it was sold to Francis Marion in 1773. Okay. And so that's the house. We got some whitewash images. There we go, drawings. Those ain't real people. Okay. All right, and then that's part of the plantation. Again, no real images. Tashi Plantation. Tashi Plantation. Again, these are all supposed to be gone or underwater or relocated, right? This is from the Lord Proprietor granted Pierre de Saint Julien. Okay, so the same Huguenot, he had all this land. This one guy from 1688, we know there's a Moor at that time, right? Fresh Huguenots. They just became Huguenots at that. They just become, 1,000 acres in Carolina that form 1-2 plantation. Wow, 1,000 acres. In 1705, St. Julian was granted an additional 1,000 acres from the. He was very liked by the so-called British, right? Known as the Pushy Plantation. Pushy, like 1P and 1-2, is named for an early Native American settlement. All right, that right there. That's all I need to read to know that they built their plantations on top of American Indian settlements. And they even named it after them. Okay? No receipts, huh? What are you talking about? All right. Wow, this is why this is important, guys. They're not just creating hydroelectric plants, and they're literally erasing history, guys. They're literally erasing history before people started investigating, trying to find documents or find out who these people really were, who really owned these places, who was the majority of people really here. Right? It told us earlier, 901 families mostly were so-called black. Right? In July 1831, the southern, okay, so that's the Poochie house, right? Look at this drawing. This is what I'm saying. We're getting drawings. This ain't this is a drawing. Again, looking like the other lady, like Beavis and Butthead with the same George Bush nose, George Washington nose. Yeah, okay. This is, yeah. All right. The Rocks Plantation, and so on and so on. All right. Probably a little drop here. Let's see if we get dropped. It's probably dropping all this, man. All right. Look at this. We can't really tell who that is right there. Can't really tell. the the place is literally blackened out. Like literally it's black. Damn. Like crayon color black. And then they added this Photoshop white. All right. All right, dog. All right, dog. I got you. Sorry, man. I ain't falling for it. But who were the original American Indians? Whom? Oh, yeah. We've already talked about that so many times in this channel. That's what my channel's about, man. Like, but we're going to tell both sides of the story, man. We ain't going to be biased. You are both. You are the American Indians and the Black Europeans. Both were melanated. Both were grouped as black. Both were called Negroes. Both have been disfranchised and now being called African American, grouped together. And it's in your blood. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That did look Photoshop. I'm telling you, that frame looked Photoshop. I'll show it back. I'm not afraid to look at it. Look at it here without the image. There's no image. Look. And now look at it here. That looks like, come on now, man. What's wrong with her head? Son, get at it. All right. All right, dog. Somerset Plantation. So, hold on. Here we go. Then we got, okay, so these are nice houses, right? Just want to show you. Look, this is what I'm saying. They're going to show you modern images. This is when cameras came out, way after the original settlers, way after, 200 years after. Yeah, see, this is what I'm saying. 1926. Come on now. That's mad modern. There's cars there. There's cars there. Come on now. That's 1900s. Okay. You see? Springfield Plantation. That's another one. All right, these are like big houses, nice houses, right? Nice old houses. The Wampy, John Stewart in 1696. We're talking about a Stewart, right? Just like James Stewart, like King James, the Stewarts, right? We're talking about Jacobites, right? In those times, 1600s, right? Received a grant from the Lord's proprietor for 804 acres known as Wampy, west of the Biggin Swamp. Part of this grant would later become lands for Somerset and Somerton plantations. Wasn't that named after so-called Native American settlements? Yeah. They're building it on top of this, right? One people through marriage passed to the Kane family. So they were mad. It says here's a whole story behind this, right? And then we got Whitehall Plantation. So this was owned by the Porcher family. Okay, no, hold on. It says it says located 5 miles northwest of Pinopolis, a plantation thought to be named for an early owner, Blake Lee White, a commissioner for high roads in St. John's Parish. Colonel Thomas Porcher, owner of the neighboring Ophir Plantation, purchased Whitehall and built a house for his son Thomas. Thomas moved to Whitehall, joined by his bride. Wow. And they got a drawing right here. It says Whitehall Plantation. Oh, look at the descriptions on the next page of this drawing. So John Blake White, son Begley. Okay, yeah, that's a drawing. Whitewashed and stuff. That's a pretty big house right here that they flooded. 1854, said Dr. Charles Lucas added a new wing. Okay, that's this over here. The view of the Whitehall house. That's a pretty big house, the Whitehall house. All right, this is pictures with cars. That's modern pictures. This photograph was taken Whitehall, hosting a meeting of St. John Hunting Club. Yeah, that's when they owned it, right? That's when the incubators and the orphan babies had grown up and they owned it. Whitehalls. Woodland Plantation. First records of the Woodland Plantation indicate Edwards as the owner. And then plantation, he gave it to Stephen DeVukes, a master builder. DeVukes had inherited Belle Island Plantation. All right, that sounds like a Huguenot too. DeVukes, that sounds French. All right, so remember, most of these people were Huguenots, as they told us earlier. All right. And that's it, guys. That's it. Good. I went through the whole thing. I just wanted you to see. All right. And again, in case you came late, we were going over the book Sunken Plantations, the Santee Cooper Project. Again, it told us this was literally mostly black families that got relocated. Don't assume that the nice houses and when it says plantation is the evil white slave master only. I'm trying to make you really think about something here. There's not only creating hydroelectrical plants, but they're also erasing history, guys. They're also, trust me, erasing history. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the underwater ghost towns and sites of America. This was Lake Moultrie and Lake Marion in South Carolina we were talking about. There's many, many more to go. I'm gonna try to do another one this week on some underwater town, lake, man-made lake in America, in North America. Might be close to you. All right, I'm gonna talk about all of them as much as I can. There's so many. There's so many, guys. I can do a whole channel just on that. A whole channel just on the underwater sites and towns they got buried, they flooded on purpose, not by accident, not because they wanted to help with electricity. Because this electricity, this technology is bull. We should be living off different technology, natural technology, not the one they give us where they have to charge us and everything, and it's harmful to the environment and everything. And even to us, to our health, having all these antennas and wires and frequencies all around us, like it's not good for the frequencies in our body, right? Anyways, appreciate everybody that came through. Hope you enjoyed the reading today. I'm gonna come back with more on this topic and a lot more new videos. I'll probably be doing a live genealogy this week. Somebody wants to volunteer, so I'm like, okay, let's do it. Let's see what we find. I hope you tune into that, right? Make sure to tune into that. Let me see, 34, 38. We're gonna go out. Hold on, is that the one he told me to play? 34. Oh, is this? Yeah, it's this one right here. Gonna go out with a Breeze remix by Signs. All right, by Signs. Shout out to Signs. Okay. Thank you for the instrumental. Appreciate everybody that came through. Appreciate all the support. My patrons, the moderators, everybody that was in the live chat. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the reading and this unveiling of history. A lot of you didn't know. All right, we got a lot more to go through. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.